Imagine every whisper you never heard, every conversation that started the moment you left the room, every smile that hid resentment, every critic who counted your failures more carefully than your efforts, every person who watched your pain and secretly felt satisfied because it made them feel stronger. They thought they understood your ending. They thought this was the chapter where you broke. They thought the betrayal would drain you, the lies would stain you, the rejection would shrink you, and the silence would suffocate you. They thought if enough doors closed, if enough people turned cold, if enough voices rose against you, eventually your faith would crack, your confidence would die, and your hope would disappear like smoke in the wind. But they made one fatal mistake. They saw your tears, but they did not see your sujood. They saw your silence, but they did not hear your dua. They saw the pressure, but they did not know who was holding your heart together beneath the weight of it. They thought they were fighting you. They did not realize they were standing in the way of a soul being carried by Allah. And that is why they are confused now. Because what they meant as destruction became direction. What they meant as humiliation became purification. What they meant as pain became power. What they meant to use to bury you became the very soil Allah used to grow you. Allah says, do not lose heart nor fall into despair, for you will have the upper hand if you are believers. That is not just a verse for battlefields. That is a verse for the believer who feels surrounded, for the one who has been pushed, doubted, slandered, rejected, tested, and left carrying invisible wounds. It is for the one who thought the storm would finish them, only to discover that Allah was using the storm to reveal who they really were. Because this is what your enemies never understood. Allah does not always remove the fire. Sometimes He lets the fire burn just enough to forge something unbreakable inside you. And this is why they regret it now. Because they did not destroy you. They introduced you to the version of yourself that only hardship could awaken. They did not end your story. They became one of the reasons your faith deepened, your character sharpened, and your rise became impossible to ignore. There are 7 truths in this journey that you must understand. The first is this: the fire they lit only forged your steel. They thought pain would make you collapse. Every harsh word, every betrayal, every rejection, every insult, every silent exclusion, every door they tried to close on you, they thought all of it would weaken your spirit until there was nothing left. They believed that if they created enough pressure, eventually you would lose yourself. They believed your softness meant you were fragile. They believed your tears meant you were finished. They believed the wound was the end of the story. But pain does not always destroy. Sometimes pain reveals. Sometimes pain exposes false versions of you that were never meant to survive. Sometimes pain burns away dependence on people, hunger for approval, and fear of standing alone. Sometimes pain takes everything fake, every shallow attachment, every illusion of control, every weak foundation, and leaves behind only what is real. That is what happened to you. The fire did not consume you. It clarified you. It burned away the need to be understood by everyone. It burned away the habit of trusting every smile. It burned away the version of you that thought peace could be found in pleasing people who were never at peace themselves. And in the middle of that pain, something stronger began to appear. A quieter version of you. A deeper version of you. A version of you that no longer panicked every time a person changed. A version of you that no longer mistook popularity for value. A version of you that knew how to stand in the wreckage of disappointment and still whisper, Ya Allah, I know you are with me. That is what they could not understand. They thought the fire was punishment. But for the believer, fire can be training. Just like raw metal is placed under heat until weakness leaves it, Allah sometimes allows the believer to pass through pressure until what remains is stronger than what existed before. Not louder, not more arrogant, stronger, cleaner, sharper, more focused, more difficult to manipulate, more difficult to shake. And look at what happened. The betrayal they planned became your awakening. The rejection they gave you became your redirection. The pain they caused became the place where you learned how to lean on Allah without distraction. Now when they look at you, they do not see what they expected. They expected ashes. They found steel. The second truth is this: your silence was not weakness, it was precision. One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that because you did not react, you did not feel. They think silence means defeat. They think if you did not defend yourself loudly, you had no defense. If you did not answer every insult, you had no answer. If you did not return the harm, you were too broken to stand. But what they never understood is that silence can be one of the sharpest forms of strength. Because not every battle deserves your breath. Not every accusation deserves your explanation. Not every person deserves access to the emotional cost of what they did to you. Some people do not attack you because they want truth. They attack you because they want reaction. They want to drag you into their chaos. They want to see you emotional, unstable, desperate, angry, distracted. They want proof that they still control your inner world. And the moment you refuse to give them that, their power begins to die. That is what your silence did. It starved them. They kept throwing poison, but you did not drink it. They kept baiting you, but you did not bite. They kept performing for an audience, but you refused to stand on their stage. And while they mistook your silence for surrender, Allah was using it as a shield around your dignity. Because your silence was not emptiness. Your silence was strategy. It was the place where you stepped back and asked yourself the questions that changed your life. What actually matters? Who am I becoming through this? Why should I waste my peace proving myself to people committed to misunderstanding me? Why should I spend my strength arguing when I could spend it healing, learning, building, praying, and rising? And in that silence, you started doing the work they never saw. You returned to Allah more seriously. You repaired parts of your soul you had neglected. You became more disciplined with your time. You began reading, learning, reflecting, and rebuilding. You turned inward not to collapse, but to construct. You stopped feeding every fire outside and started tending to what was being built inside. That is why your silence was powerful. Because while they were busy speaking against you, you were becoming someone they could no longer influence. And that is what silence does. When it is rooted in faith, it gives you room to hear yourself clearly. It gives you space to hear Allah's reminders more deeply. It teaches you that not every response needs to be public in order to be powerful. The world is addicted to reaction, but the believer learns that stillness can be a weapon. There is discipline in not saying everything you could say. There is control in not doing everything your ego wants to do. There is honor in walking away from arguments that lower your soul. There is strength in keeping your tongue clean when everyone expects filth from you. So, no, your silence was not weakness. It was precision. It was the calm hand of someone who knew that wasted energy is still wasted even when it feels justified. It was the wisdom of someone who understood that your future was too important to be handed over to every person trying to provoke your past. The third truth is this: they mistook your kindness for weakness, and many people do. They see gentleness and assume there is no strength behind it. They see patience and assume there are no boundaries. They see mercy and assume there is no power. But only shallow people think cruelty is strength. Real strength is being able to hurt someone back and choosing not to. Real strength is having every reason to become bitter and refusing to let bitterness own your heart. Real strength is staying dignified when ugliness would be easier. Real strength is being wounded without becoming poisonous. That is what they did not understand about you. Your kindness was never fragility. It was discipline. You knew how to answer harshness with restraint. You knew how to protect your soul from becoming a mirror of the harm done to you. You knew that revenge may satisfy the ego for a moment, but it often leaves the heart darker than before. So even when they pushed you, provoked you, dismissed you, lied about you, and used your softness as an excuse to underestimate you, something deeper in you remained intact. Not because you were naive, but because you were guided. You understood that forgiving does not mean forgetting everything. It does not mean removing wisdom. It does not mean ignoring red flags or inviting repeated harm. It means you refuse to let another person's ugliness decide the condition of your heart. That is why your kindness became power. Because while they were being hardened by envy, pettiness and ego, you were being strengthened by mercy, self-control and trust in Allah. While they were becoming smaller inside, you were becoming larger. While they were feeding anger, you were feeding faith. And that changes a person. Kindness anchored in Allah does something extraordinary. It keeps the soul alive. It keeps the heart human. It keeps pain from turning into permanent corruption. It allows you to acknowledge what happened without becoming what hurt you. That is why the kind believer is not weak. They are dangerous to darkness. Because darkness expects one thing from pain, that it will multiply itself. That wounded people will wound more people. That betrayal will produce more betrayal. That cruelty will produce more cruelty. But when a servant of Allah absorbs pain and still chooses a clean heart, darkness loses. That is what happened through you. They thought your softness would make you easy to break. But they forgot something. Water is soft too. And over time it carves stone. Your kindness was not passivity. It was moral force. It was the decision to remain connected to what Allah loves, even when others gave you every reason to do the opposite. And that is why they regret it now. Because the softness they mocked outlived the hardness they worshipped. The fourth truth is this. They underestimated your faith, and that was their greatest mistake. They looked at your circumstances and judged your future by what they could see. They saw the closed doors. They saw the disappointments. They saw the setbacks. They saw the loneliness. They saw your moments of weakness. They saw the pressure. And based on all of that, they assumed you had nothing left. What they did not see was the fortress you were building in secret. They did not see the prayer mat. They did not hear the du'as whispered through tears. They did not know how many nights you carried your brokenness to Allah instead of carrying it to the world. They did not understand that every time life cornered you, you ran not toward despair, but toward your Lord. And that changed everything, because faith is not always loud. Sometimes faith is a person sitting alone in a dark room saying, Ya Allah, I do not know how this will end, but I know you will not abandon me. Sometimes faith is praying when your chest is tight. Sometimes faith is reciting Quran through tears. Sometimes faith is saying Alhamdulillah while your heart is still healing. Sometimes faith is waking up again after another disappointment and still believing that Allah's plan is better than the one that just fell apart. That is what held you together, not their approval, not perfect circumstances, not immediate success. Allah. And once a person learns how to place their weight on Allah, they become difficult to destroy. Because the world can shake someone whose roots are in people. It can terrify someone whose identity is in image. It can control someone whose self-worth depends on applause. But the one who says, my Lord is enough for me, enters a different kind of strength. That is what they did not understand. They thought your prayer was weakness. They thought your reliance on Allah was passivity. They thought your trust was denial. But your faith was the thing they never factored into their calculations. Every time they thought you were nearing collapse, faith rebuilt you. Every time your mind filled with fear, faith steadied you. Every time they thought the pressure was finally too much, your heart found one more reason to trust Allah. You remembered His promises. You clung to His words. You learnt that with hardship comes ease. You learnt that whoever relies upon Allah, He is sufficient for them. You learnt that a heart attached to Allah may be wounded, but it is never abandoned. And now when they see your calmness, they cannot understand it. Because they keep trying to explain your rise in worldly terms. They do not know that your greatest resource was invisible. It was the closeness to Allah they could never measure. That is why they regret underestimating you. Because what they saw as your lowest season was the season in which your faith became a fortress. The fifth truth is this: their criticism became your catalyst. They thought criticism would freeze you. They thought if they repeated your flaws enough, you would begin to believe them. They thought if they laughed at your dreams, you would stop pursuing them. They thought if they highlighted your failures loudly enough, you would carry their words like chains. But they misunderstood how pain works in the hands of a believer. Because a believer does not always waste criticism. A believer can convert it. Not every insult deserves attention. But sometimes an insult reveals exactly where you need discipline. Sometimes doubt from others becomes the mirror that shows you where fear still lives. Sometimes a painful comment becomes the moment you finally say, enough, I will not remain who I have been. That is what happened with you. Their mockery forced you inward. Their negativity made you ask harder questions. Their doubt pushed you into clarity. You began to examine yourself honestly, not from insecurity, but from sincerity. What needs to grow? What needs to heal? What habits have been holding me back? What excuses have I been hiding behind? What kind of person do I want to become before Allah? And instead of letting criticism define you, you let it refine you. You started reading more carefully, learning more deliberately, practicing with more consistency, showing up with more discipline, setting goals with more intention, building quietly where they expected you to remain stagnant. That is the thing critics often do not understand. The person they keep attacking may be using that very pain as fuel. They were busy talking. You were busy improving. They were counting your failures. You were studying your gaps. They were trying to embarrass you. You were trying to become better. And when growth is fueled by sincerity, it becomes difficult to stop. You did not let their words become your identity. You let them become resistance. And resistance, when handled correctly, builds strength. Just like muscle grows by pushing against pressure, character grows by pushing against resistance. And every insult, every dismissal, every sneer became resistance against which your future self was strengthened. Not because they had power over you, but because Allah taught you how to use even ugly things without letting them poison you. That is why they regret it now. Because they thought their criticism would shrink you. Instead, it sharpened your vision. It accelerated your discipline. It taught you how to prove things with your life instead of your mouth. And that is a dangerous kind of person to underestimate. Someone who turns pain into practice, practice into growth, and growth into quiet proof. The sixth truth is this: your wounds became your wisdom. Some people carry pain and become harder. Others carry pain and become wiser. You chose wisdom. That does not mean the wounds were small. It does not mean betrayal did not cut. It does not mean rejection did not sting. It does not mean disappointment did not sit heavy in your chest. It means you refused to let pain remain meaningless. Instead of saying, why did this happen to me? And stopping there, you eventually began to ask a deeper question. What is Allah teaching me through this? That question changes everything. Because then every wound becomes a classroom. The betrayal teaches boundaries. The rejection teaches redirection. The loss teaches detachment. The criticism teaches discipline. The loneliness teaches reliance on Allah. The delay teaches patience. The heartbreak teaches the difference between attachment and surrender. And slowly, what once looked like damage begins to reveal itself as education. You learned who deserves access and who does not. You learned that not every person who enters your life is meant to stay. You learned that intuition is not paranoia when it is rooted in wisdom. You learned that peace is too valuable to hand out cheaply. You learned that being kind does not mean being available to abuse. You learned that strength is not the absence of emotion, but the refusal to be ruled by it. That is what wounds can do when they are processed with faith. They do not merely scar you, they train you. And because you chose that path, your pain began turning into something others could feel the difference in. Your words became heavier. Your presence became calmer. Your decisions became clearer. Your standards became stronger. Your compassion became deeper. Because now when you see another wounded person, you do not speak to them from theory. You speak from survival. That is wisdom. Not the kind found only in books. The kind carved into the soul by hardship that did not destroy you. And this is one of the greatest reversals of all. The same wounds they hoped would disfigure your future became the very places through which Allah taught you how to walk with maturity. Now when they look at you, they do not just see someone who survived. They see someone who understands. And understanding is power. Because the person who has been educated by pain, refined by prayer, and steadied by Allah becomes difficult to deceive, difficult to manipulate, and difficult to shake with the same old weapons. That is why they regret it. Because they were aiming at your weakness, but Allah used the wound to build your wisdom. The seventh and final truth is this: your triumph became their regret. This is the part they never planned for. They imagined your downfall. They rehearsed your failure. They waited for your name to fade. They expected your story to become a warning, an example of what happens when someone cannot withstand pressure. But now they are the ones left with the warning, because your life did not end where they predicted. It continued. And more than that, it transformed. You kept walking. You kept praying. You kept learning. You kept rebuilding. You kept choosing the higher road when bitterness would have been easier. You kept holding on to Allah when the world gave you every reason to harden. And slowly, the results began to appear. Not always all at once. Not always dramatically. But unmistakably. Your peace deepened. Your confidence became quieter and stronger. Your actions gained weight. Your reputation changed. Your discipline became visible. Your faith became luminous. Your progress started speaking louder than your pain ever had. And this is where regret entered their hearts. Because now they had to watch the very person they tried to bury grow. They had to watch the one they misjudged become more grounded, more focused, more resilient, more respected. They had to face the reality that their insults did not define you. Their rejection did not stop you. Their sabotage did not finish you. Their whispers did not erase what Allah had written for you. That is the deepest regret of all. Realizing you poured your energy into trying to break someone Allah was building. And here is what makes your triumph so powerful. It was not built on revenge. You did not rise because you became as ugly as they were. You did not rise because you outshouted them. You did not rise because you obsessed over proving them wrong. You rose because you stayed with Allah. You rose because you let pain teach you. You rose because you transformed reaction into discipline. You rose because you chose growth over ego, prayer over panic, and trust over despair. That is why your triumph carries weight. It is not the shallow triumph of image. It is the deeper triumph of becoming. And once a person becomes who Allah intended them to become through the very things that were sent to crush them, that person carries a kind of victory no critic can steal. So let them regret it. Let them sit with the memory of what they said. Let them remember every time they counted you out. Let them watch in silence as Allah honors what they tried to humiliate. Because your rise was never truly about them. It was about discovering what happens when a believer stops asking, why are they doing this to me? And starts asking, what is Allah making of me through this? That is when everything changes. That is when the pain stops being random. That is when the betrayal stops being the center of the story. That is when the wound stops being the ending and becomes the doorway. And now you are living proof. Proof that tears do not mean defeat. Proof that silence does not mean weakness. Proof that kindness does not mean fragility. Proof that prayer is not passive. Proof that criticism can become fuel. Proof that wounds can become wisdom. Proof that when Allah is with a servant, no amount of hatred can stop what He intends to raise. They tried to break you, but they did not know who was holding you. They saw your trembling hands, but they did not see the heaven you were calling. They saw the storm around you, but they did not see the mercy carrying you through it. They saw the chapter of pain, but they had no access to the ending Allah had already written. And that is why your story unsettles them now. Because you did not become smaller, you became clearer. You did not become bitter. You became wiser. You did not become louder. You became stronger. You did not become obsessed with revenge. You became anchored in Allah. And a person anchored in Allah cannot be broken the way people imagine. They may be tested. They may weep. They may bend. But by Allah's mercy, they do not stay down. So if you are in that season right now, if people have lied, betrayed, criticized, dismissed, or underestimated you, then remember this. The fire may hurt, but it can also forge. The silence may feel lonely, but it can also sharpen. The wound may cut deeply, but it can also teach. The criticism may sting, but it can also awaken. And what others meant for your downfall can become the very process through which Allah raises you higher than you ever imagined. So do not beg to be understood by everyone. Do not waste your life explaining your value to people who only recognized weakness. Do not hand your peace to those who fed on your pain. Take everything back to Allah. Take the wound back to Him. Take the confusion back to Him. Take the humiliation back to Him. Take the nights of fear, the anger, the tears, the disappointment. Take it all back to the one who knows how to turn broken things into beautiful things. Because Allah is sufficient. And the one who truly places their trust in Allah is never left empty. So let your rise continue. Quietly, faithfully, powerfully. Let your discipline speak. Let your peace speak. Let your character speak. Let your consistency speak. Let your nearness to Allah speak. And let their regret echo in the silence they once tried to fill with doubt. Because your rise was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving to your own heart that Allah's plan was always greater than their hatred. And now you are the proof. The proof that they can wound you, but with Allah they cannot finish you. The proof that they can talk, but they cannot rewrite what your Lord has written. The proof that they can light the fire, but they cannot control what Allah chooses to forge within it. So stand tall, not because you never bled, but because Allah did not let you die where they expected you to. Stand firm, not because you were never afraid, but because faith taught your fear how to bow. Stand grateful, not because the road was easy, but because every hard mile was shaping the soul they failed to destroy. And keep walking, because what they regret is not just that you survived. What they regret is that by Allah's permission, you became more powerful, more peaceful, more disciplined, more faithful, and more unbreakable than you ever would have been without the very pain they sent to stop you. That is their regret. And that is your proof.